Hi, I'm Holly Morris-Kuentz, and I'm superintendent in Dripping Springs ISD. As our district shares out our long-range facility planning committee recommendations, I wanted to share some information with you regarding our middle school growth. In terms of our middle school growth, the long-range facility planning committee had two recommendations. The first was to build future middle schools at the 1,200 student capacity and to consider expanding Sycamore Springs Middle School. You can see from this heat map that we have quite a bit of middle school growth in our future over the next 10 years. As the committee looked at how to address this, some of their key considerations were a 1,200 student capacity provides for better construction and operational costs. Building fewer campuses lowers our land costs and our construction costs. It also lowers our total cost of ownership, and it means that we can be more efficient with our staffing. When the committee talked about the differences between our 1,200 and 850 student middle schools, we saw that there were no impacts on school size for our student success. And ultimately, we found that the 1,200 size better enables our feeder patterns for attendance zoning. With 3 elementary feeder schools, it's a better size to help us prevent splitting elementary school 5th grades into 2 middle schools. You can see from this chart that the blue line is the cost of 5 middle schools at an 850 capacity. The more schools we have adds to the expense for our total cost of ownership, not only because there are additional land costs, but also there are just additional annual operating expenses. And there are other efficiencies in our costs that we can pick up on things like staffing. When the committee talked about middle school overall, they also had a conversation about considering expanding Sycamore Middle School. With the overall middle school plan to be 1,200, the committee saw that there were benefits to building our schools at this size. Leaving SSMS at 850 would make it an outlier. Originally, SSMS was designed to be able to be expanded from the 850 student capacity to 1,200. And if you look at this map, you can see that the previous planning for that site creates an opportunity for us to match the middle school standard that we've set at 1,200. This redesign also gives us an ability to look at some of the current challenges that SSMS is facing right now and to address those within the construction. One important conversation point to the Sycamore Springs Middle School expansion is that we currently have an 850 capacity middle school with 3 elementary schools feeding into it. When you look at the heat map of the SSMS attendance zone, we still have several areas in orange and yellow signaling continued middle school growth over the next 10 years. If that campus is undersized at 850, then we'll eventually have to have elementary schools that will need to split 5th grades. And we could have an issue of students needing to drive past SSMS to get to their middle school due to the capacity size. This brings up a common question about how can we rezone SSMS growth, and could it possibly move over to DSMS? But the reality is that DSMS is actually growing at a faster rate. By 23-24, we're going to outstrip our total middle school capacity of 2050. When we talk about expanding Sycamore Springs Middle School, you can see that Dripping Springs Middle School continues to grow steady, while Sycamore Springs actually holds around the 1,200 student mark. So a middle school expansion is a much more cost-effective way for us to meet our middle school growth needs, and it matches the Sycamore Springs Middle School elementary student projections well after the expansion takes place. If we talk about a 1,200 student capacity for our middle schools at potential build-out numbers, then the district overall would need 5 middle school capacities. Thanks for taking the time to join me, and I hope you'll take the time to visit our website and share your feedback.